Bucky O'Hare, the toad-fighting space captain, was created by Larry Hama, known for his involvement in the G.I. Joe Marvel Comics series. The concept was developed by Hama in the late 70s, but the character's first official appearance was in the Continuity Comics series released in the mid-80s. Despite its unique premise, with mammals fighting amphibians in a science fiction setting, the title was short-lived with only 6 issues being released. Perhaps due to the success of Easton and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the late 80s and early 90s, the character was resurrected and reintroduced in the 1991 animated series Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars. Despite lasting one brief season, consisting of only 13 episodes, merchandise was released including a toy line, clothing, activity sets, and 2 video games, one for the arcade, the other for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Growing up, I didn't have much experience with Contra or the original Castlevania, so this was the game that defined Konami quality for me. I rented it numerous times from my local video store because I was a huge fan of the animated series. In fact, I own pretty much the entire toy line, but those are probably at the bottom of a landfill. On a much happier note, I do still have a VHS tape containing 2 of the episodes from the series. It was completely released in this format during the show's run in 1991. Unfortunately, the series has only been officially released on DVD in a few countries. I say officially because there is an overpriced bare-bones set being sold on Amazon.com, but there's no mention of a stateside release of the series on the official Bucky O'Hare fan site, nor on TV shows and DVD.com, so the legitimacy of this release is in question.
It's horrible.
Anyway, when I got back into the NES, this is one of the games I was most looking forward to playing again. I never beat it as a kid, probably because I only had access to it on weekends after school, but more on that later. Let's get to this. Both games were released by Konami in 1992 during the peak of the animated series. While the arcade version is a traditional beat-em-up in the style of The Simpsons or X-Men, other titles in the Konami arcade family, the NES version is a fast-paced side-scrolling platformer. In both games, you can play as Bucky and the crew of the Righteous Indignation, O'Hare's ship, including Deadeye Duck, Jenny, and Blinky. In the NES game, you can also play as Willy, the human child who ends up in the Universe, the world of the Toad Wars. Both games are based in the animated series, and one prominent character from the cartoon adaptation, Bruiser the Berserker Baboon, is absent.
Berserker Baboon!
With speed and agility being emphasized in the NES version, Bruiser's omission is justified. However, Bruiser would be a perfect fit for the arcade game, but I digress. The story starts off with Bucky and his fearless crew being attacked by a Toad squadron and kidnapped. As Bucky, your first goal in the game is to rescue all of your comrades, who are dispersed across 4 planets. Like Mega Man, you have the option to play the stages in whatever order you wish. Also like Mega Man, the order in which you tackle the stages may have an impact on your ability to progress in certain levels. For example, Blinky is rescued when you defeat Toadborg on the green planet. Blinky's bomb attack is necessary to destroy the ice blocks that impede your path on the blue planet. This is a very clever idea on Konami's part, utilizing the different personality traits of the Righteous crew, and is similar to Mario 2, where some characters jump higher and others are more powerful. More on this topic later. Though the game's levels follow linear paths, it's more than just the standard left-to-right progression. The Red Planet stage includes a screen where you ascend moving platforms to advance, the Green Planet has a downward waterfall, and the Yellow Planet has a westward moving asteroid belt. These make up the majority of your adventure, but the icing on the cake is the addition of shoot-'em-up action akin to Section Z or Burai Fighter for the final levels. As discussed previously, the variety of characters, none of whom play exactly like the other, further keeps the game from being monotonous. Each character has unique abilities that you need to utilize in certain parts of the game. The standard attacks are variations on a regular laser, however, charging your attack by holding the B button accesses these special abilities. Bucky can super jump, Deadeye can climb walls, Willy has a super laser, Jenny produces an energy ball that can be manipulated with the D-pad, and Blinky can fly. There are numerous power-ups that can be collected at certain points in a level, Some power-ups increase your life meter, while others improve upon your special skill with the ability to charge for a longer duration. So, in short, Bucky will be able to jump higher, and this is a lifesaver when you get closer to the end of the game. Unlike the TMNT game, surprisingly made by Ultra, a subsidiary of Konami, the enemies in the comics and cartoons such as Alligator, the aforementioned Toadborg, the main villain the Air Marshal, and the entire Regis staff of course, are well represented in the game. I'm not ragging on the first Turtles game by any means, it's one of the classics for the system. How Konami dropped the ball in the representation of the enemies in the TMNT game while excelling with Bucky O'Hare is beyond me. Characteristically representative of a Konami title, however, are the controls, which are tight and responsive. Navigating for even the toughest terrain is unhindered by lag or slowdown. Similar to Bill and Lance in Contra, Bucky can shoot not just horizontally, but vertically, though you can only shoot downward by jumping and holding the down button while attacking. The other characters, however, have a designated attack path, with the exception of Jenny's charged attack. One minor annoyance is that, while rapidly pressing the attack button, you can unintentionally activate your charge ability. Though this is a small quibble, it could cause many aggravating accidental deaths. With this in mind, you have to be careful not to mash the B button when in dangerous terrain. Once you have rescued your crewmates, there's no time for reacquainting, as the righteous indignation is once again besieged by the Toad Army. It was a trap, set to capture the funky fresh rabbit himself. Bucky awakens and is briefed by Blinky as to the events that transpired. Your mission this time around is to navigate the prison block in order to, you guessed it, free your imprisoned mates. When you encounter your crew, all seems normal at first, but what's this? The Air Marshal has turned your team against you? That fiend! After you beat some sense into your helpless fellows, it's time to break out of this popsicle stand and escape the clutches of the Toad Armada. As to be expected of most old school games of the 80s and 90s, the difficulty, on a scale from 1 to 10, is like taking a ceiling spike pit to the face while riding a large boulder. All the trademarks of an NES-era platformer are included, such as descending lava traps, similar to the lasers in Quickman stage, slippery ice jumps, and... you get the point. Later in the game, especially once you've recovered your squad in the jail, you'll encounter puzzle sequences where you'll have to put your allies' abilities to use in order to get to the next screen. The most aggravating of the bunch is a revolving room that rotates clockwise one click at a time. Your position on one part of the maze will determine your success or failure, as your placement when the room rotates could result in victory or instant death. This puzzle will test your patience, as it will take trial and error and several attempts to complete. All of these factors contribute to the game's difficulty. However, the game is forgiving in that you have unlimited continues, and checkpoints are accessed when you get to the next point of the level. If you are unsuccessful and die during a boss fight, unlike the Ninja Gaiden or Mega Man games, you pick up right at the beginning of the fight. This is a blessing and a curse, as any power-ups you picked up during the course of the level are nulled when you continue. Sometimes the game is gracious enough to leave a much-needed life power-up prior to a big fight, but most of the time this is not the case. It is in these instances that your skills are put to the test, especially in later boss fights when there are multiple enemies to defeat, while also avoiding lasers and projectiles. Further on that topic, the difficulty of the bosses ramp up as the game progresses. While the first few bosses are easily beaten by mashing the B button and jumping at appropriate times, the real test of your skills comes when you reach the bosses in the prison, particularly the Toad airship. It took me at least a good hour to triumph over that thing. These factors paint the title as being one of the more difficult in the NES library, and it does live up to that reputation. However, beating the game is not impossible. When capturing the footage for this review, I knew that I had to accomplish this Herculean task, unfulfilled since my childhood. It was time to get hardcore. Come on! Yes! Through sheer determination, after many deaths, and just as many near controller throws, I finally succeeded in my childhood quest. With the defeat of the Air Marshal and the destruction of the Toad Mothership, Bucky and his crew escape victorious. However, the battle may be won, but the war is far from over. What more needs to be said about Bucky O'Hare? It's easily my favorite game from the NES era. Finally completing the game after all these years is a huge accomplishment. Playing for the game again further enhances its standing among the benchmarks of the system's library. Though the storyline is repetitious, it is made up for with excellent control, varied gameplay with the ability to play as multiple characters, faithfulness to the source material, and one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Despite the difficulty, the game is just plain fun. If you're a fan of traditional platformers in the vein of Mega Man or Little Samson, you should give this a try, but be prepared for a hair-pulling but not unfair challenge. In the words of Dead-Eye Duck, let's
Stroke some toadies!